Welcome to Motion Bytes Academy, where motion design meets media theory. Today's episode is From Hypodermic Needles to Echo Chambers, a century of media influence theories explained. We'll look at how media has influenced audiences over the last 100 years, in a simple, easy-to-follow way.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a really big question, diving into almost a century of thinking about media.
That's right. The core question is, how much does the media actually influence us? Our thoughts, how we act, our whole culture.
Yeah, it's huge. We're going to trace how the theories evolved, starting from, well, basically outright fear.
And moving towards much more complex, nuanced models we use today. It's quite a journey.
So why is this deep dive important for you, listening right now?
Well, understanding these ideas is like getting a decoder ring for the modern world, right? Especially with information coming at us from everywhere.
In the early days of studying this, it wasn't just academic curiosity, was it?
Not at all. It really stemmed from this deep-seated fear, particularly around propaganda during wartime. The worry was that mass media, things like radio especially, could just overwhelm everything else.
Like family, community, school, the traditional stuff.
Exactly. Could it just bypass all that? That was the fear driving the research.
Okay, so let's start where it all began. The simplest, maybe scariest idea, the direct effects model.
Right. Sometimes called the hypodermic needle model. Bit dramatic, but you get the idea.
It sounds like it, like the media just injects.
A message directly into you, the passive audience member, and boom, instant, predictable reaction. The audience was seen as just this big, undifferentiated mass.
Just waiting to be told what to think or do.
Pretty much. A very simplistic view looking back.
And was there a big event, like a specific piece of media that made everyone think, oh no, this is real?
Absolutely. The classic example everyone points to is the 1938 radio broadcast of War of the Worlds.
Orson Welles.
Orson Welles and his Mercury Theater Group. They adapted the H.G. Wells novel, but did it as a series of, fake news bulletins. Sounded totally real.
And people panicked.
Well, some people certainly did. There were reports of widespread panic, people thinking Martians had actually landed in New Jersey.
Wow. So that seemed like proof positive, right? Media can just take over.
It really fueled that fear. If a fictional play could cause mass hysteria, imagine what deliberate propaganda could do. It basically kicked off the whole field of mass communication research based on this idea of powerful direct effects.
But like you said, simple theories.
Really. Rarely tell the whole story. And pretty quickly, research started to push back against this idea of a completely passive audience. This takes us into phase one.
The challenge phase. Or what researchers called the Great Discredit.
Exactly. A key moment was the People's Choice Study back in 1940. Lazarsfeld and his colleagues looked at the U.S. presidential election.
They wanted to see how campaign media actually affected voters.
Yeah, they went in assuming, the more media people consumed, the more likely they were to be swayed. Standard hypodermic needle thinking.
But that's not what they found, was it?
Nope. Totally undercut the old model. They found that the people consuming the most media, they'd usually already decided who to vote for.
Ah, so the media was just reinforcing their existing views.
Largely, yes.
Yeah.
And crucially, for the undecided voters, the ones who were genuinely up for grabs.
They weren't just listening to the radio ads.
Not primarily. They were much more influenced by people they knew and trusted. Community leaders, family, friends, what they called opinion leaders.
So the media message went to these opinion leaders and then trickled down.
Precisely. The two-step flow of communication. That immediately made the audience look much more complex, much more active, not just passive sponges.
Okay, so if the audience isn't passive, that flips the whole research question, right?
Totally. It shifts from what does media do to people to what do people do with media?
And that leads us to uses and gratifications theory.
You got it. Katz and Blumler were key here. It puts the audience firmly in the driver's seat.
So it's not about the ad working on me. It's about why I chose to even pay attention to that ad or that show or whatever.
Exactly. We actively select media to satisfy certain needs or desires. Maybe we want information surveillance, they call it.
Like checking the news.
Or maybe it's about personal identity, finding role models or ways to express ourselves. Or maybe it's just diversion, escape, entertainment.
Or even social connection, right? Like watching a big reality show finale and live tweeting it with thousands of other people.
Perfect example. You're using that show for entertainment, sure, but also for that feeling of community, that interaction. You're actively using the media for multiple gratifications.
And how does this apply to trickier stuff, like media violence?
Well, instead of saying violent media makes people aggressive, uses and grats suggest that maybe people who already have aggressive tendencies might seek out violent content.
Because it satisfies some need. Excitement, maybe?
Could be excitement or maybe catharsis, an emotional release. The point is, the person is actively choosing it based on pre-existing factors, rather than the media just creating aggression from nothing. It's a tool they use.
Okay, so the audience is active. But that doesn't mean the media has no power, right? It just works differently.
Exactly. Which brings us nicely into phase 2, acknowledging that active audience, but looking at more subtle, maybe long-term influences. Let's talk agenda setting.
Right. This one isn't about telling us what to think.
But what to think about? Big difference. The media might not dictate your opinion on, say, climate change, but by constantly covering it.
They make sure climate change is on your mental agenda. It becomes one of the important issues you feel you should have an opinion on.
Precisely. The issues that get the most prominent, sustained coverage become the issues the public sees as the most important. It's about salience, making things seem significant.
You see this all the time. A huge natural disaster gets wall-to-wall coverage for a week, everyone's talking about it, then the coverage drops off.
And public attention moves on. Even if the underlying problem hasn't been solved, the agenda shifted.
Can you give another example of how this works long-term?
Sure, think about smoking. Decades ago, it was often seen as just a personal choice, maybe a bit glamorous even.
Right, Humphrey Bogart, movie stars.
Exactly. But through years and years of sustained media attention, news reports on health risks, anti-smoking campaigns, documentaries, the agenda shifted.
It went from a personal habit to a major public health crisis.
And that change in the public agenda drove massive changes in policy, social norms, everything. That's agenda-setting power over time.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, staying with long-term effects, what about cultivation analysis, George Gerbner?
Gerbner. Yeah, cultivation theory looks at the really deep, slow-burn effects of heavy media exposure, especially television back in the day because it was so ubiquitous.
So it's not about one show, but the cumulative effect of watching lots and lots of TV over years.
Exactly. Gerbner argued that heavy TV viewers start to develop a perception of reality that mirrors the world on TV rather than the actual world.
Because TV presents a pretty consistent, repetitive set of messages and images.
Right. And the classic example he used was violence.
There's way more violence on TV dramas and news than most people encounter in real life.
Way more. So if you're a heavy viewer, you're constantly seeing the world depicted as a violent, dangerous place.
And the result is?
What Gerbner called the mean world syndrome. Heavy viewers tend to perceive the actual world as much more frightening and dangerous than it really is.
So they might be more anxious, more distrustful, maybe more supportive of harsh security measures.
Statistically, yes. Their worldview has been cultivated by the consistent messages of the media world.
That's fascinating, especially now. Gerbner focused on broadcast TV, but what about today with personalized social media feeds?
That's a crucial point.
Yeah.
Now, it's not just a general mean world being cultivated. Algorithms can create these hyper-personalized echo chambers.
So my feed might cultivate a very specific kind of worldview, tailored just for me, maybe even more disconnected from reality than the old TV world.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
It's cultivation theory on steroids, in a way. Really something to think about.
Okay, so we have media setting the agenda, cultivating our worldview. Let's shift into phase 3, symbols and social pressure, symbolic interactionism.
Right. This comes more from sociology. The basic idea is that things don't have inherent meaning. Meaning arises through our interactions with each other.
We agree on what things symbolize.
Exactly. And we act based on those shared meanings. The media plays a massive role in creating and spreading these shared symbols and their meanings.
So it's less about direct persuasion, more about defining what things mean in our culture.
Precisely. Think about advertising. A luxury car, like a BMW, just metal, glass, rubber, right?
Yeah,
Technically.
yeah.
But through media, advertising, movies, it comes to symbolize success, status, maybe power. We react to the symbol, not just the object.
Or like how certain tech brands, say Apple, try to symbolize innovation or creativity.
Perfect. Or how clothing brands symbolize youth or athleticism. Media attaches these meanings, these symbols, to things. It shapes our understanding of the social world through symbols.
And once these meanings, or maybe dominant opinions, get established, how are they maintained? That sounds like the spiral of silence.
Elizabeth Noel Newman's theory. Yes, this one is quite powerful and a bit chilling. It explains how dominant opinions often stay dominant.
How does it work?
It taps into a very basic human fear, the fear of isolation. The theory states that people are constantly scanning their environment to figure out what the majority opinion is.
Like sticking a finger in the wind to see which way it's blowing?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
And if you sense that your own opinion is in the minority,
You're less likely to speak up.
exactly, you keep quiet to avoid social isolation, criticism, or just feeling like the odd one out.
And when people with the minority view stay silent,
It makes the majority view seem even more dominant than it actually is, which encourages even more people in the minority to stay silent. It's a spiral.
creating this illusion of consensus.
Yes. The source material often points to historical examples like people in Nazi Germany who privately disagreed with the regime but were afraid to voice it publicly.
Because the perceived consensus was so overwhelming, their silence just reinforced it.
Exactly. And you see this playing out constantly today, especially online, right?
Oh, definitely. If your Twitter feed or Facebook feed seems overwhelmingly on one side of an issue,
You might think twice before posting a dissenting view. The potential backlash, the feeling of isolation, it's magnified online. The spiral can spin much faster.
the media, especially social media, becomes that primary gauge for the climate of opinion.
It really does. And if that climate looks hostile to your view, silence seems like the safer option for many.
Wow. Okay, let's shift gears significantly now. Phase 4. We need to talk about Marshall McLuhan.
McLuhan, a really pivotal and sometimes controversial figure from the 60s. His big famous idea.
The medium is the message.
That's the one. Published in Understanding Media in 1964. It was radical then, and it's still debated now.
What did he actually mean by that? It sounds counterintuitive. Surely the content matters.
He wasn't saying content doesn't matter at all, but he argued that the technology itself, the medium, whether it's print, radio, TV, or now the internet, has a more profound effect on us and our society than the specific messages it carries.
How so? Give me an example.
Okay, think about print versus television. Print culture, he argued, encourages linear thinking, logic detachment. Reading a book is a private, focused activity.
Right.
Television, on the other hand, is visual, immediate, immersive, maybe more emotional. It engages different senses, demands a different kind of attention. The form of TV changes how we process information, how we experience the world, regardless of whether we're watching a documentary or a sitcom.
So the experience of using the medium shapes us culturally and individually.
That's the core idea. The technology itself reshapes human experience. He famously talked about a global village created by electronic media, connecting everyone instantly.
Which sounded kind of wild back in the 60s during the Cold War.
Very much so. But then the internet happened, and suddenly McLuhan looked incredibly prophetic. People started rereading him seriously.
His focus on the technology's impact became super relevant.
Absolutely. And building on that focus on the form or structure of media, we get media logic theory.
Okay, what's that?
It suggests that the formats, styles, and sort of grammar of media become so pervasive that other social institutions start to adopt that same logic to communicate effectively.
So institutions start acting like the media?
In a way, yes. Think about politics. TV news often favors short sound bites, conflict, visual drama.
Okay.
So political candidates learn they need to be good at delivering sound bites, looking good on camera, engaging in that kind of debate style. They adopt the media logic of television to succeed in the political arena.
You see it with religion too, right? A televangelist adopting slick production values.
Exactly. Or universities creating flashy promotional videos. They're using the logic of dominant media formats to present themselves. It even shapes how we think disagreement should work. If TV debates are loud and fast, maybe we start thinking all debates should be like that.
The style leaks into the culture. Got it. Okay, finally, let's pull some threads together with more recent ideas about the audience. The prosumer.
Right, David Gauntlet's term. It highlights how the lines between being a media consumer and a media producer have blurred dramatically.
Especially online.
Especially online. You, the listener, you watch videos, read articles, consuming.
Yeah.
But you also comment, post photos, make TikToks, maybe even write blog posts producing.
So we're both consumers and producers.
Prosumers.
Exactly. And that fundamentally changes the power dynamics and the flow of information compared to the old broadcast era.
Then there's Stuart Hall and reception theory. This adds another layer to how we understand messages, right?
A really important layer. Hall said, okay, a media text, a film, an article, whatever, is encoded with certain meanings by the producer. But the audience decodes it, and that decoding isn't always the same.
We interpret things differently based on our own background, experiences, beliefs.
Precisely. Hall identified 3 main reading positions. There's the dominant reading, where you basically accept the intended message as is.
You get what they were trying to say.
And then there's the negotiated reading. You might accept the overall message, but tweak parts of it, maybe disagree with certain aspects based on your own life.
Okay, kind of meeting it halfway. And then there's the oppositional reading. This is where your own social position, your beliefs, your experiences are so different from the assumptions embedded in the text that you completely reject the intended meaning.
Like watching a show about rich people succeeding and thinking, this ignores all the systemic barriers?
Exactly. That's an oppositional reading based on a different lived reality. The meaning isn't fixed in the text. It's created in the interaction between the text and the audience member's context.
Super important nuance. And one last piece, audience engagement levels.
Yeah, Jeremy Tunstall pointed out that we don't consume media with the same level of attention all the time. He talked about primary engagement, like being fully immersed in a movie at the cinema. Total focus.
All attention on the screen.
Then secondary engagement. This is more common now, maybe watching TV while also scrolling on your phone or eating dinner. Divided attention.
Multitasking.
Right. And tertiary engagement, where the media is just background noise, music while you work, the news on the radio while you drive. It's just ambiance.
And most of our consumption today is probably secondary or tertiary.
A lot of it is, yeah. Which obviously impacts how deeply messages might affect us compared to that primary, fully focused state.
Okay, wow. We've covered a lot of ground.
We really have. From that simple, scary hypodermic needle idea, where media just controls you.
All the way to these really complex models, the audience actively uses media for gratification.
The media subtly shapes our reality through agenda setting and cultivation.
The technology itself changes us, like McLuhan said.
And the audience interprets the messages differently and engages at different levels and even produces content themselves now.
So these theories, even the ones from decades ago, they're not just history lessons, they're tools we can use right now.
Absolutely essential tools for understanding media bias, how the internet works, advertising, political campaigns, how we see ourselves in the world. It's all deeply relevant.
Yeah.
Influence is rarely simple or direct anymore. It's complicated, layered.
So we've talked about how media can set the agenda, tell us what to think about. And we've talked about how we're all becoming prosumers, creating and consuming the content.
Right. Which leads us to a final thought, a question really, for you to chew on after this deep dive.
If the audience is now also the producer, if we're all feeding the machine that creates the content we consume,
Yeah.
who ultimately is setting the agenda now? Who is responsible for the issues we all end up thinking and talking about?
That's it for today's episode of Motion Bites Academy. We've explored how media has influenced audiences over the last century, from hypodermic needle theory to modern echo chambers. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And remember, whether it's motion design or media theory, there's always